research before we got on here, and I saw. So when you guys were talking about Kang, this was very, I think, when before the book even came out, but you guys were talking about Kang, and you speaking on Kang, you said Kang cannot get out of his own way. That ego and drive to be the best version of himself is exactly what pushes him back to what he never wanted to be. And then you said that the entire universe is written against this man who's trying desperately to push out of it, and he thinks that it's the universe doing it, but it's not. It's him. It was always him. He just wants to be a good person. Now I know Gorgon has a little bit of pushback on that, so I wanted to see, can you unpack that a little bit? What about Kang, and from a writing perspective, do you feel that he wants to be a good person?
Is that where the pushback is? You're like Nathaniel doesn't want to be a good person.
Yeah, Thor throws me to the wolves, but it's what is good, right, and what is a person, right? Because there's almost a separation, right, in comics where, like, arguably Kang has one of the barriers that separates us as a three-dimensional entity, right, a person, from what is a god, is being bound by linear time, right? I'm a regular fan of saying that in writing is one of the biggest things that holds humans back in comics, and then we see as they grow and they lose that barrier, ascend to godhood. Look at where Eddie Brock currently is as Venom, right? With it all, perfect example. So is Kang even really, as someone who has mastered what is linear time, a person anymore? And I feel like we could really feel that disconnect in the way y'all wrote him, right? With no one left to conquer but myself, and that it was a battle of conquering the self. And I wonder if there needs to come a point where Kang needs to accept that the days of being a person are truly beyond Kang. No matter what Kang tries to do to re-steer that, those days are gone. Kang is a god.
So that's a really interesting point. The idea that by conquering linear time you stop being a person is a fascinating premise to me, because so Eddie's version of this is a little bit different than Nate's version of this. So I'm going to use them to talk about the distinction, because I think it's actually a really solid distinction. Eddie has ascended to a certain space where it's not simply that he doesn't live linearly anymore, but it's that he has access to all of space and time. And like Kang, which is why I think Kang got involved in that story, he has started to loop back on himself and cause himself chaos and cause himself problems, right? That by becoming God, he's causing himself as a person problems. Kang, while he does have access to all of space and time, Kang is still living more than Eddie is, I think, because Eddie has access to all the symbiotes, and it's a very omniscient concept. Kang is living still in a straight line. Nathaniel can, that straight line, which is Nathaniel's life, is still experienced linearly. He's still experiencing moment, then moment, then moment, then moment, then moment. And the rest of time is warping around that, and he's mastered it insofar as he's conquered all of that stuff. But he is still, in my mind, a person, because he is still moving like all of us do, moment to moment to moment to moment to moment, and he cannot properly rewind. Kang, if he rewinds his life, he's not rewinding his own experience. He's just rewinding the rest of time. What's happened has happened to him. And that's why the book is structured the way it is. Because the way that we wanted to essay this is that no matter how much God-level power Nathaniel achieves, he is still living in a straight line. And that straight line, no matter how much he tries to bend it up, is still a straight line. And it inevitably lands at the beginning of a new line, which is the next Nate, which was just the first Nate, right? And that's the loop. But the loop is a cage that he's built for himself as a god, right? That keeps him as a person. It's this really, to me, it's the fascinating thing about him, is that, yes, you're right. The best way for Kang to get over his shit would be for him to be like, I'm done trying to be a man. I'm done trying to be in love. I'm done trying to be in charge. I'm done trying to strive for power or get in quipping fights with Dr. Doom. I'm done trying to prove anything to anyone, right? And it's time for me to just be the ascended thing. And the ascended thing, ultimately, I would argue, is Immortus. That's what Immortus represents. And if we had I think I've said this a little bit publicly, but like we had a sequel we wanted to do to Kang, which maybe someday we'll get to do, but the character's kind of overexposed right now, so it didn't make a lot of sense, given that like he's in Avengers and like Jed's got that character, and I'm doing Timeless and all this stuff, and it's like the last thing I want to do is step on Jed McKay's toes. So, but we talked a lot about doing a sequel, and that sequel would have to be fundamentally obsessed with this idea. Like the whole of the sequel was obsessed with the idea of what is a mortis to this character, because that's one thing we don't touch in Only Myself Left to Conquer is a mortis, is this idea that at some point at the end of his line, that linear line, he finally does go, oh, that was a bunch of bullshit. I could have just sat back and like gotten zen and like kept the timeline safe. I could have just been a quote unquote good person, and by doing so stop being a person, and maybe good becomes relative, right? And that's an interesting place to play that character, but I don't think Kang gets there. I think when he gets there, he's a mortis, and until then he's got that, like, it's the same thing that like Alexander had, right? Like Alexander was a man. He was a man who conquered half the known world, but like he was a man. The people who we think of in our world as gods, they're all just people. They're just people with an enormous amount of power and ambition and damage that drives them forward. And so I wouldn't really know how to write a book entirely from the perspective of a god. I can write a book from the perspective of a human who's trying to reckon with it, which I think we do a lot. Obviously, like that's what we're doing on Star Trek. It's what we've done on this. To some degree, it's what we're going to be doing in Batman Beyond this year. It's definitely what we're doing in Outsiders. Like, there's a lot. We're very interested in that line between being a person and being something more. And how that it's very easy for your physical body to ascend in these superhero universes, because you can get like hit by radiation or get struck by lightning or get, you know, an alien symbiote or whatever. But that it's actually very hard to ascend your mind, which I argue is relatively true of humans in our world too.
Agreeable.
Wow.
I think this is fascinating.